We have insider reporting that senior members of the Department of Justice didn't want to bring this case because it's so weak. We have never seen such an enormous crisis the DOJ is we're witnessing every single day under this administration. Bondi wanted to charge Bolton this week instead. Think about how they're thinking about it, right? They're not thinking in terms of facts and law. They're thinking, what can we announce this week so we can assuage Trump? They're literally thinking about these indictments in a sense of trying to assuage a rogue president who wants revenge. So the reason why so many people don't know the theory behind this case is because it's not 100% possible at this point to determine with 100% certainty what the f even happened.
Hey folks, please like, comment, and subscribe. And make sure to check out my newsletter. Information is in the description.
So let's talk a little bit about James Comey and this indictment of him. So James Comey was the FBI director. He served for various years under the Obama administration and then famously under Trump as well. He was the head of the FBI at a time when there were a number of controversial, to say the least, investigations by the FBI, and some that pertain to the 2016 election. That famously includes the mid-year exam investigation. This is into the Clinton email matter, which is different, by the way, of the DNC email situation where it was hacked by Russians. The Clinton email matter had to do with her use of a private email server during her time at the State Department. That was a matter that was referred to the Department of Justice by the State Department itself, and the Obama DOJ, think about the contrasting times, opened an investigation into Hillary Clinton, a member of their own administration. Such a concept of investigating your own political party is a quaint notion these days, given who's running the White House and who's running the DOJ. But that is one of the investigations that James Comey was at the head of. Now, when I say at the head of, it doesn't mean that he's the day-to-day guy, but he's largely apprised of some of the conclusions of these investigations. He oversees it as the head of the FBI. He was also in charge of the Russia investigation in the aftermath of the Russia interference campaign into the 2016 election. This was an investigation called Crossfire Hurricane, which is the subject of a lot of debate and dispute. Now, Crossfire Hurricane was started specifically after a tip from a friendly foreign government, Australia, a guy by the name of Downer, who reached out to the government to basically tell them that a member of the Trump team had given him knowledge before news of the DNC hack had occurred by the Russians, when the Russians hacked the DNC, that there was evidence that this person who was a member of the Trump campaign had advanced foreknowledge about that. And so they reached out after that had been made public. And so an investigation, a counterintelligence investigation was launched, and a criminal investigation into Russia's interference, and specifically focusing on 4 members affiliated with the Trump campaign, or formerly affiliated with the Trump campaign. And these included Papadopoulos, who, minor figure in the Trump campaign, included Michael Flynn. It included temporary foreign policy advisor named Carter Page. He was embedded with Paul Manafort. That's right. Paul Manafort. Big picture, right? James Comey was in the crosshairs of a lot of people because he was at the head of the FBI during a sensitive time on investigations that touch potentially on Democratic culpability with respect to the email matter and related stuff, and the Russia investigation and related stuff. Note that Trump himself was on a target of that investigation, of the Russian investigation, Crossfire Hurricane, at the time of Comey's overseeing of the FBI, and he was fired by Trump in 2017. Democrats don't like James Comey because James Comey broke procedure by being very flamboyantly public about details relating to the Hillary Clinton matter. Really, the FBI has a policy until now. Now we're kind of just like throwing caution to the wind with Kash Patel tweeting on his fucking toilet in the middle of a New York restaurant and giving misinformation to the public about the Charlie Kirk shooter, but I digress. That notion also, in addition to the notion of prosecuting one's own political allies, the notion of having an FBI that speaks with their indictments, speaks with their investigatory acts, as opposed to one that's publicly commenting on everything. That used to be a norm of the FBI. And James Comey broke that norm, and to the Democrats' ire, when he decided, hey, I'm going to just like riff on Hillary Clinton and say she was irresponsible. So he did that, ostensibly in response to Loretta Lynch having a meeting with Bill Clinton on a tarmac. That's why he said that he didn't, include the Attorney General when he did that matter. And then later on, when there was an additional batch of content from a laptop belonging to one of Hillary Clinton's aides and affiliated also with Anthony Weiner, who was indicted for other stuff, he announced to the members of Congress that he was reopening the Hillary Clinton investigation on the eve of the election. And there are, I think, credible reports and also polling that suggests that might have cost Hillary Clinton the election. So Democrats were pissed at Comey for his actions. And Trump told Comey that he had his full confidence. Trump basically initially was friends with Comey and understood, as the rest of the public did, that Comey was a negative weight on the Clinton campaign and maybe even a dispositive weight on the Clinton campaign. That's James Comey. Later on, with the administration, there's this infamous sit-down between James Comey and Trump demands loyalty from James Comey. Trump also wants James Comey to drop the Michael Flynn matter. Comey, then presiding over the FBI and having essentially an unheard of norm violation. The President of the United States is not supposed to speak directly to the FBI director. Why? The FBI director is a subordinate to the Attorney General of the United States. It would be like, your commander being skipped over by the general to talk to you. There's a chain of command issue there. It's also a norm that the president, and an important norm, one that I support, is not supposed to be involved in these individual prosecutorial decisions, especially ones that bear on political enemies, because there's a fear of an abuse of power. So that was a problematic situation so far as rule of law in the Department of Justice back in the day. It's not the only time that Trump tried to do this. He publicly was pressuring his first Attorney General in the first term, Sessions, former Alabama senator. He multiple times tried to fire Robert Mueller, who was a special counsel that was announced after Comey himself was fired. Someone else needed to take over the investigation into the Russia matter and related matters. That was Robert Mueller. Trump famously called the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, Preet Bharara, directly. Bharara didn't pick it up, and he was fired, among others. So this is all context that I'm giving you about James Comey, but also about Trump's serial and escalating violations of a norm against political prosecutions and involvement by the White House into matters of the Department of Justice. Right? The White House does oversee the Department of Justice, but it's supposed to be at a high level. We don't want a political elected official to insert and maintain his position in power by using the awesome might of prosecutorial authority for corrupt purposes to entrench himself in office. So that's a little bit of background on James Comey, why he's a target of political ire, and to explain a little bit about why Republicans don't like him. It's because, one, he presided over this Russia investigation, which they view as ultimately illegitimate from its inception, which is a wild thing to say, given the egregious nature of the actions by Russia into our 2016 election. They don't like him because he presided over and signed off on the FISA warrants issued against Carter Page, even though there's no evidence. Thank you so much for the subscription. Even though there's no good evidence that Comey knew that there were problems with the FISA warrants, basically not disclosing to the FISC court. These are specific Article 3 courts that are created to handle foreign intelligence surveillance warrants, okay? Where you're alleging that someone is a foreign asset with probable cause, and it gives you permission to spy on them. Now, this was done of Carter Page, who was a former member of the Trump campaign. People don't tell you that, by the way, because people will just say, people like Rob Knorr, liars and hypocritical shills, self-admitted hypocritical shills. Look to the video I just posted the other day. They'll say they spied on Trump's campaign. He was a former. He was disassociated with the campaign in September. The first FISA warrant was applied for in October 2016. And so they lie about that. They lie about linear time. So he was not a member. He was never an important member of the Trump campaign either. He was a water boy, unimportant member of the Trump campaign. In fact, in response to some negative reporting about Carter Page, they disclaimed ever having a relationship with him, even though he was affiliated with the campaign for some months. But they don't like him because he was in charge over that, and they've built this whole conspiracy narrative over the FISA warrants where he is the head of the DOJ. They think also he let off Hillary Clinton easy because they misunderstand the statutes related to national defense information, classified information, and there was no good case against Hillary Clinton. So they basically blame him for protecting the Clintons, which is a laughable notion given what I just told you about his involvement in the election, or at least in investigatory announcements that are highly unusual and that could reasonably affect an election. But they basically think that Comey let the Democrats off scot-free because he just loves Democrats so much. Comey did say to Trump that he was not under investigation, which was true at the time. The rationale that Trump gave for firing James Comey, he basically forced Rod Rosenstein, then Deputy Attorney General Sessions, had recused himself, so the decision came to Rod Rosenstein, who also had the decision to appoint Robert Mueller. The rationale, the official rationale for firing James Comey was because he mishandled the Hillary Clinton investigation, if you can believe it, right? So Donald Trump's official narrative for why he fired Comey was, I fired Comey because he treated Hillary Clinton so unfairly and broke procedure to hurt Clinton. If you believe that, there is something wrong with you. Obviously a lie. Obviously Trump accepted and welcomed and was overjoyed at the fact that Comey made the announcements when he did. He shook Comey's hand famously in the Oval Office, pointed him out directly when they were meeting all these people, pointed him out and ushered him over, gave him a shake. He was thrilled that Comey had done that. But in the aftermath, when Comey was insisting on the investigation proceeding into Michael Flynn and others affiliates, it seemed something was irking Trump. And that's when, by the way, Trump did become a target of an investigation by Robert Mueller, which I think to Robert Mueller's credit, the investigation was quite voluminous and comprehensive to the extent that it could be, given a lot of the efforts by the Trump administration to dodge procedure and to withhold certain information dishonorably, and compared disfavorably to Joe Biden and his openness when he was investigated for his documents. I think to the shame of Robert Mueller, he decided not to come to an ultimate conclusion on whether to charge Donald Trump. Now, he was a sitting president, and DOJ policy forbids sitting presidents from being charged. That's from the OLC. This is pre-Trump for the United States. Technically, the Trump administration has never, the Supreme Court, what's the difference? The Supreme Court has never said that sitting presidents can't be charged, but you should assume that there's some implications based on Trump for the United States that they probably would have something to say about charging a sitting president. And at this point, it seems that many of the theories that I think should be chargeable, that is to say, for example, obstructing justice by firing people, don't even seem to be cognizable as crimes even for former presidents. The Supreme Court, in issuing Trump versus United States, has essentially made Watergate like a nothing burger in retrospect, if you were to believe the preposterous ruling and think that it made sense or was at all what was required by the Constitution. But that's, I guess, a little bit of a side point. This is, again, all background to show you why the relative different, why Comey has become an object of a political nature. And then Comey has been a bit of a showboat. He comes out and he starts talking, about the department, and he starts, talking about his views on politics. He releases a book. He testifies before Congress various times. That he's not. I don't take him to be a showboat on that because he was like literally compelled to with subpoenas and shit. But he is an outspoken figure. There's a movie made about him. And so he is, I would say, a flamboyant character, an out there character, but way more honorable than the FBI director we currently have in Kash Patel, and way more upholding of the norms of the department, even given his gross violations of them against the Democrats in the 2016 election. But this is all context. And the other relevant context that I mentioned was Trump's willingness, his insistence, in fact, on using the powers of his office, the trappings of his office, to entrench himself in office and go after political enemies. He showed that he was willing and desiring to do that from day one. From day one, when he told James Comey, hey, let off Michael Flynn, he's a good guy. From day one, when he is calling U.S. attorneys and saying, and having private or attempting to have private conversations with them over the head of his appointed attorney general. From day one, when he's excoriating Robert Mueller, interfering with Sessions and the movements of the department, abandoning people who were his erstwhile allies. Jeff Sessions was, incidentally, his first supporter from the Senate, a big supporter of Trump. And he abandoned him because why? Because he wasn't loyal enough. Because for once in his pathetic life, Jeff Sessions did the right thing and recused himself from the Russia investigation. Partly because he was caught lying about meetings he had with Russians. There's always something else, isn't there? But also, it was the right thing to do. And Trump never let him forget it. That's important context too. That when you serve at the pleasure of this president, you better do what the fuck he tells you to do all the way. You're loyal to one man and not to any other principle. That is why we're here, as I'll preview. Like, there was another U.S. attorney who was in charge of this case. By the way, this case and this matter has already been investigated in the previous Trump administration and by John Durham, and they redid it to get to the right result. And they fired the U.S. attorney that they had just installed. And there are already people resigning from the U.S. attorney's office in the Eastern District of Virginia. And there's some grumble from insiders who ostensibly know the thinkings of Pam Bondi and what she's on about. But again, it's grumble because Pam Bondi knows, as does the U.S. attorney who he's installed into this position, who has no criminal prosecution experience at all. Zero experience. He's made her U.S. attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia for one reason and one reason only. She is willing to put her name on documents and indict James Comey because she's not going to make the same mistake that Jeff Sessions made. Pam Bondi is not going to make the same mistake that Jeff Sessions made. Or Bill Barr. Bill Barr, who refused, again, for once in his wretched life, did the right thing and refused to call the election of 2020 into dispute, to use the powers of his office to install Trump as president. Pam Bondi ain't going to make that mistake. So that's a little bit of background knowledge on Trump's history of abuse of the DOJ. He called for Joe Biden and others to be indicted in the lead up to the 2020 election. What was the first impeachment all about? Well, the first impeachment was all about him trying to get another prosecutor general in Ukraine to open a criminal investigation against the Bidens. It's all the same shit, guys. At every stage, Trump is telling you he wants to use prosecutorial authorities, both domestically and foreign. The Ukraine Prosecutor General's office, renowned for its corruption at that time, pressuring Zelensky, and also the Prosecutor General at the time, Lutsenko, to open investigations, announce criminal investigations into the Bidens. That's what the first impeachment was about. It's all the same shit. That's why this is so predictable. Anyone who's surprised at this, you have been watching the same movie. This was predictable from time equals zero. And in fact, it's worse now because everyone who is joining his team has already priced in that corruption because they've seen his past conduct. I almost wish that we had Lactoid in the call today because I was hoping to push him on shit like this. But no, I mean, this is the same modus operandi that was at issue in Trump term 1, in which he tried to utilize against his political opponents then as now. In the interim, this kind of meta culture has developed among Trump that places Comey, other intelligence officers, Clapper, Obama-era officials at the center of a bullseye. Not just them either. Some other congressmen. Adam Schiff was one of the leaders in the House of Representatives at the time into some of these impeachment matters, into some of these committee hearings that related to some of these issues. So he's in the crosshairs. Letitia James, Attorney General of New York, who successfully brought a civil fraud case against Donald Trump in New York. She's also in the crosshairs, but Comey is a big target. And now Trump has used his authority to fire the U.S. attorney in the Eastern District of Virginia and appoint someone who's willing to charge Comey. But I haven't told you what he's charging Comey for. Why haven't I told you what he's charging Comey for? By he, I mean Trump, because that's really what's going on. Because it doesn't matter about what to charge James Comey with, about what crime he committed. It's not about crime. This is about revenge. It's not about, figuring out who's responsible for some kind of wrong as according to U.S. statute. It's about going after enemies. That's what it's about. So why are we getting the indictment today? Well, it's because the statute of limitations runs out for some of the more popular but ultimately flawed theories of culpability for Comey. That's why it's coming out this week. It's because we're close to a 5-year cutoff from his last congressional testimony. So that's why it's coming out this week. The pressure is this week is because they need to find something to charge this guy with. Not because, look at Jan 6, something happened, is he culpable? Not take a look at all these fucking classified nuclear secrets we found here and he's obstructing justice. Let's punish him for that. Not, oh, look at all these falsified business records in New York. Who's responsible for it? Is Trump responsible? Okay. No, this is a guy who we don't like, who's a political enemy of the administration, and we got to get him on something, on anything. That's the context here. So James Comey represents a class of political enemy that is known to the MAGA insiders, where there is this subculture that considers him, among others, to be part of a rogues gallery related to certain narratives, deep state narratives, integral deep state narratives. And we got to get him on something. They don't give a fuck. Half the people who are commenting on Twitter don't even know what this is about. And you know why they don't know what it's about? Because we can't for certain know what it's about. Why? Because look at this fucking indictment. That's why. Because look at this. That's it. That's the whole thing. Practically no detail whatsoever. There are good theories about what exactly is going on here, and I'm going to walk you through some of them. We actually have the alleged quote of the statement which constitutes the alleged false statement and obstruction of justice. So we have that statement. So we know what statement is at issue, but we don't know anything else. We have insider reporting that senior members of the Department of Justice didn't want to bring this case because it's so weak. Trump fans didn't want to bring this case. Bondi wanted to charge Bolton this week instead. Think about how they're thinking about it, right? They're not thinking in terms of facts and law. They're thinking, what can we announce this week so we can assuage Trump? Let's charge Bolton this week, and then we want to charge Comey. So they're literally thinking about these indictments in a sense of trying to assuage a rogue president who wants revenge. So the reason why so many people don't know the theory behind this case is because it's not 100% possible at this point to determine with 100% certainty what the fuck even happened. It is a 2-page indictment. Again, I'll walk you through some of what we know right now. And there's a really, I think, great article that maps on the different theories that I'm going to share with you. And so you'll know more on this by watching. But that's the indictment, folks. That's the indictment. We have never seen such an enormous crisis the DOJ as we're witnessing every single day under this administration. The corrupt deal for Mayor Adams to have his case dropped. A bunch of prosecutors resigned, career officials, nonpartisan officials, members of the federal societies who clerk for like Robertson or Scalia resigned over that nonsense. You have the DOJ being involved in approving the corrupt $400 million airplane bribe from Qatar. You have the DOJ arguing that Trump is immune. Trump is immune from even having to have any obligation to enforce the TikTok ban. Speaking of which, follow me on TikTok at Pisco. You have the DOJ pushing for the Department of Homeland Security and for ICE to send people off without any due process to gulags in El Salvador, to third countries that are engulfed in civil war, Uganda, South Sudan. They have no connection to those places. The DOJ is arguing for, under Trump, such an expansive view of presidential authority that is at its maximum, totally on all fours with a monarch. So we're in a deep crisis right now. The FBI director, one of the components of the Department of Justice, is engaged in Twitter wars with Democratic senators. Look at how unhinged their Twitter is. Out in Nevada, we have a U.S. attorney who's an Israeli citizen who says that there's no innocent Palestinians, that to a person, man, woman, and child, that they all deserve annihilation. That's the U.S. attorney in Nevada. The U.S. attorney in Nevada, who, by the way, technically oversaw the highest federal law enforcement a sting operation that had a Israeli intelligence officer trying to get child prostitution, and they let him go to Israel. We found out last week that Tom Homan, the border czar, took $50,000 in cash bills promising government contracts in a sting operation by the FBI. He took that money last year. And you know what the Trump DOJ did? They closed that investigation. DOJ is talking about prosecuting flag burning. Pam Bondi says she's going to go after hate speech, and Trump affirmed it. It is a fucking disgrace. Anyone who's going to stand up for this Department of Justice, they couldn't even find the fucking shooter of Charlie Kirk. Dude had to turn him in. Kash Patel goes up stage like a fucking idiot. This is what happens when you let good cops be good cops. With a straight face, this guy says that. Charlie Kirk, brother, we have the watch, and I'll see you in Valhalla. A national disgrace. And anyone who would defend the conduct of the Department of Justice or any of its components is your enemy. They know it's corrupt. And the reason you know it's corrupt is because they say it's payback, bitch. That's what they say. Their views on what they consider to be the original sin are so preposterous as to be indistinguishable from confabulation. But in their mind, so this is to get you into the MAGA mind, in the MAGA mind, they consider, again, confabulations, lies, preposterous interpretations. They consider the actions of the DOJ under Biden and under Trump term 1 for some reason. Apparently, the DOJ under Trump term 1 was also a Democrat DOJ run by Biden. It's this weird thing with linear time. They consider the DOJ under Obama, under Trump term 1 and Biden to have engaged in sedition against Trump and a political witch hunt against Trump. That's what they call it. They think it's lawfare what the DOJ did under these different administrations, including Trump term 1. They think it's lawfare. They think it's a political witch hunt. And so when they say just desserts, when they say that's what you get, bitch, they're admitting to you that what's happening right now is a political prosecution and they're okay with it. So this is what I have to say to you. Even if you believe the crazed fabrications, the delusional interpretations of the facts as expounded by the other side, what they're telling you is they're no better. That is to say, even if you believed the crazed confabulation of the other side and their interpretation, their warped, insane interpretation of the facts under the previous DOJs, even if you believe that, they're admitting out loud that they're okay with political prosecution because that's what they see those acts as. And they say, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. That's them saying it's good. It is good when our side does it. When we do political prosecutions, that's good. And you should hold them to that. They don't give a fuck, even if it were the case that there were political prosecutions of Trump, which I wholeheartedly deny. Trump was indicted because he's a fucking criminal. And these indictments of Trump were based as fuck. Hopefully there'll be a way to get just desserts for Trump through the legal system, holding him accountable to the crimes he committed. But even assuming that it was a political witch hunt, they're telling you, and that's okay when we do it. They're admitting that. Rob Knorr, who is one of these commentators who loves the John Solomon slop, the Miranda Devine slop of these fucking know-nothings who claim to get into the weeds on these reports, Durham report, Mueller report, prosecutions, Smirnoff prosecution, Hunter Biden files, all that shit. People who don't know anything, who are propagandist shills. Rob Knorr said the other day, it's on my video, it's good to be a hypocrite. That's the attitude to take. Citing favorably Gavin McInnes, founder of the Proud Boys, another friend of his. So they are your enemies. I'm not advocating for you to do anything violent at all. I condemn the shooting of Charlie Kirk, and it is not the time, not appropriate, not ever appropriate right now to do political violence, to go in the streets and like attack people. That is not what I'm saying, but they are your political enemies. And you should consider them that. They hate you, and they want to turn your country into Hungary. They want to turn your country into Russia, to take our republic, our experiment, and turn it into a corrupt kleptocracy for the benefit of the elite who service Trump. That's what this whole thing is about. And it's even less about the results of this prosecution, because I'll tell you up front, I think it's very unlikely that this prosecution will result in a conviction for James Comey. I think it's very unlikely that occurs. But it's almost not even about that. It's about the signal. If the DOJ can be weaponized this way, it will disincentivize corporations, individuals, politicians, and internal folks, right? This is sending a signal, don't investigate us. Don't investigate allies of Trump. Because if you investigate allies of Trump, we'll come after you. That's the signal. You think anyone in the government's going to take a second look at a Trump-affiliated, MAGA-affiliated guy when they know the DOJ is having a wide path to attack anyone who investigates Trump-allied people? So it's not just about this case. It's about the broader signal that this sends. And it actually does have a downward effect on economic progress, in addition to rights, obviously. There's a deadweight lost associated with these kinds of mafia states, and obviously the uncertainty for people who want to engage in the political arena as well. All very important to realize that It's not just the game. It's the game within the game. You got to look at the broader picture here. That's crucially what the Supreme Court was unable to do in the Trump v. United States decision, is to look at the broader picture, look at the context here. And with that, let's go through the indictment. It won't take long. In the Eastern District of Virginia, U.S. versus James Comey. Indictment. No intro, no fact section, just right to the causes of action and the counts. False statements within the jurisdiction of the legislative branch of the United States government. So lying to Congress. That's what this is. Lying to Congress. On or about September 30th, 2020. Notice the date here. So we're 3 or 4 days until the expiration of the statute of limitations, 5-year statute of limitations. So that's why it's happening right now, is because they felt urgency to charge a guy. They wanted to charge a guy, and they realized one of their last opportunities to do so, because this guy has not been in the government since 2017, folks. This guy was last in government 8 years ago, and that's why it's happening right now. The defendant, James Comey, did willfully and knowingly make a material, false, fictitious, and fraudulent statement in a manner within the jurisdiction of the legislative branch of the government of the United States by falsely stating to a U.S. Senator during a Senate Judiciary Committee hearing. This is, I believe, to Chuck Grassley, or this might be to Ted Cruz. So it depends on which statement we're talking about. It might be to Ted Cruz, which incorporates Chuck Grassley's question from 2017. And we'll go through the analysis that I want to share with y'all because it's really good. But there was a statement, I believe, to Chuck Grassley in 2017 that I'll tell you in a second. And then Ted Cruz asked, like, basically, do you stand by your testimony? And James Comey said, yeah, I do. James Comey says he had not authorized someone else at the FBI to be an anonymous source in news reports regarding an FBI investigation concerning person 1. So this statement is concerning specific matters. And the specific matters at issue here are either Donald Trump investigation or Hillary Clinton investigation. And I think it's likely this person actually is Hillary Clinton. So we don't know who person 1 is. We don't know if person 1 is Trump or Hillary Clinton, but it's probably one of those two. Okay? So understand there's the Chuck Grassley quote, I think this is right, we'll confirm in a second, from 2017, incorporated by Ted Cruz in his questioning in 2020, concerning a third person, both Trump and Hillary. But here, the authorization of an anonymous disclosure was about one of them, either Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump. You understand that? The statement was false because, as James Comey then and there knew, he in fact had authorized person 3. Notice we don't see a person 2 here, okay? So person 3 to serve as an anonymous source in news reporting regarding an FBI investigation concerning person 1. Again, that person 1 is either Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton in violation of the statute against lying to Congress. And this is also the same basis for the obstruction count. I'll have you know that there was another count that was presented to the grand jury. The standard here for getting an indictment through a grand jury is probable cause. And you don't need to be unanimous. So there's this saying that says a grand jury can indict a ham sandwich. It's because it's an ex-parte proceeding. Ex-parte means only one party, okay? Only one of the parties. And I tell you this because the grand jury refused to allow one of these charges to go through. They don't need to be unanimous, and one of the charges didn't get through on PC grounds. That's a bad sign for the prosecution. I put this on Twitter. It's a bad sign because it means basically that at least one of their theories here was rejected by a grand jury when they had all the power to display the evidence. Someone says the person 2 is probably Andy McCabe. I think that's probably the case. McCabe, by the way, I didn't tell you this. This guy McCabe was James Comey's deputy. So the role that currently is held by Dan Bongino, it was this guy, Andy McCabe, who now I think is a commentator for CNN. That's relevant because it would seem to, if that is the case, confirm one of the theories here over what statement this is. And it's a laughable theory if it is this case. And I'll show you why, because there's some great, like I said, this is a great article. Some additional context here. Typically, it is a high standard to allege selective prosecution or malicious prosecution as a theory to get rid of an indictment. It is technically against the Constitution to do this kind of selective prosecution. But it's just a very high standard to make a constitutional case of like malicious selective prosecution. You really need to have your ducks in a row. It's not a favored, almost always fails. Okay. This is probably the best fact pattern that I've heard of for malicious selective prosecution. So there will be a serious, one of the reasons I suspect that this indictment is as terse as it is, and we just read the whole thing, is to make it a little bit perhaps harder to dismiss. But in general, regardless, we're going to see a pretty serious, and I think one where I don't know that the Supreme Court's going to weigh in one favor. I'm not making a prediction, but if ever there were a fact pattern to establish constitutionally impermissible selective prosecution, it would be this one. And so I expect to see a motion dismissed to that effect. In fact, I'm assuming that they have probably done some of the groundwork. I'm sure that he's already retained counsel, I'm sure, and has prepared a lot of these arguments. Because there was reporting about this kind of shit going on for weeks. What do you mean by PC ground? PC means probable cause, and that's the standard you need for an indictment. Now, to convict, it's beyond a reasonable doubt, but you need a minimum PC, probable cause. So we're going to see some pretty, I think, significant motion practice in the coming days and weeks. And I think that James Comey has the better of the argument, but we'll wait and we'll see, read the motions as they come. So that's waiting in the wings, as well as the evidence of substantive guilt, right? So like one question is, are they alleging enough? Is there enough evidence to actually convict at trial James Comey? I'm going to argue fucking no. Tons of reasonable doubt here. But separate from that kind of like substantive guilt question is the malicious prosecution, selective prosecution, whatever you want to call it, the constitutional issue there, because there is a constitutional issue and that kind of thing. So keep those in your, both things are weaknesses for the prosecution. This is a weak case, is the substantive guilt component. And I think that there's vulnerability. I'm not going to say it's a done deal, but there's vulnerability from James Comey on the malicious prosecution angle. Seeing that also, this is the evidence that 12 or more jurors did not concur in finding an indictment on count 1. So there was another count which the grand jury rejected, and this is the proof of that. You following? Any questions thus far before we turn to the Choose Your Own Adventure from Ben Wittes and Anna Bauer on Lawfare, who I think have been doing good coverage here. Is there a path that Comey can expose the DOJ lawyers involved in this to ethical scrutiny? Maybe he can motion for sanctions or something. And then there's also the self-standing enforcement mechanisms of the jurisdiction and the court. So different avenues there. I think you possibly could motion for sanctions. I'm not sure though. Never been a criminal lawyer, never tried a criminal case, never even been involved. I've been involved in some criminal investigations, but never in the context of defending or prosecuting a criminal case. So I couldn't tell you there. But there are ethical standards that all lawyers have to abide. There are ways to motion for sanctions for parties. There's also self-standing enforcement powers of the jurisdictions themselves. So the answer is yes, there are ethical implications. Whether Comey himself would bring it, I'm not so sure. I don't know. So I'm going to read this article. I think this will give you additional insight into what we're talking about here. So what we're talking about is, as I mentioned and previewed, a 2020 testimony from Comey to the Senate. And this is the article. The situation on Sunday pondered the removal of the acting U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia, Eric Seibert, over his lack of enthusiasm for indicting a certain set of the president's political foes. Monday, Bloomberg News reported a White House aide and former Trump personal lawyer, Lindsay Halligan, was sworn in as an interim U.S. Attorney. This person, by the way, has no experience prosecuting criminal cases. She's like an insurance lawyer, and she worked, I think, as a staff attorney, senior staff attorney, basically handling a lot of the papers of the White House. Let me just make sure that that's true. I don't want to lie to you guys. So she was, prior to appointment, a special assistant to the president and senior associate staff secretary. By the way, she also repped Trump in that Mar-a-Lago case where she sued to get the documents, access to the documents. Remember that? Do you remember that whole thing about suing for the search warrant where Eileen Cannon, this unhinged judge in the Southern District of Florida, granted jurisdiction for Trump to temporarily interfere in a search warrant? Remember that shit? Yeah, so she was involved in that. She's an unhinged person. This is a a disgusting piece of shit. As this column discussed on Sunday, the reason for the switch was the earlier occupant of the office, that is, this guy Seibert, was apparently unwilling to move forward with the cases against New York Attorney General Letitia James and Comey. One must imagine then that Halligan, unlike her predecessor, is willing to go forward with such charges, right? That's why she was there. This is the person mentioned, by the way, in Trump's tweet, the tweet to Pam Bondi saying you have to move forward, right? This is Trump pressuring Bondi, right? Trump saying, Bondi, go after my political rivals, and basically big dogging Pam Bondi to let Halligan do whatever she's going to do. So that's what happened there, was Trump essentially undermining his own attorney general to pursue political charges against his political rivals by this loser Halligan, who is just going to do whatever Trump asks him to do. That, after all, is the only reason she now is in the role. Indeed, today MSNBC is reporting that Comey is expected to be indicted in the coming days in the Eastern District of Virginia. So let's try to play Halligan's hands out for a moment, a choose your own adventure, Lindsay Halligan edition, if you will. You, the reader, play the role of Halligan. At least as regards Comey, you don't have a lot of time. The key statute of limitations runs out in 6 days. After that, any case gets exceptionally harder. So you have a brief window in which to decide whether or not you really want to pursue this. If you don't go forward off with your head, remember how you got this job after all. But you know that both cases are weak. How do you know this? Again, remember how you got this job. Your Trumpist U.S. attorney predecessor, right? So this U.S. attorney who was the predecessor, he is a Trumpist, right? So the people who are themselves Trump sycophants, they're not bringing this case. So this person, right, Halligan, is in the unenviable position but she put herself there, right? So I guess whatever, was willing to lose his job rather than to bring these cases. So they brought on this attorney fast as fuck to bring a case. That's how corrupt these people are. So you know you're playing with a bad hand, but you move forward anyway because you have no choice. Citing Bloomberg, quote, the U.S. Justice Department is pushing ahead with its investigation of the New York Attorney General Letitia James over mortgage fraud after President Donald Trump demanded the case move forward. The case is still being pursued through the Eastern District of Virginia in an effort led by senior Justice Department official Ed Martin, according to the people who asked not to be named. One of Trump's aides, Lindsay Halligan, took over the office on Monday. So she took over the office on a Monday, and she's already decided to bring charges. You seem to be pushing forward with Comey, too. Disclosure, James Comey. So Comey's friends with these people, just so you know. They work together, but he contributed no information to this article. That means that sometime over the next few days, you have to push at least one weak case past the grand jury to keep the president happy. Let's assume that the MSNBC is correct and you focus first on the Comey case rather than the James one, as that's the one with the ticking clock. James's case relates to a 2023 home purchase. While her defenses against any mortgage fraud allegation appear prohibitively strong, that case will be the same 2 weeks from now as it is today. But assuming you decide to move forward with the Comey case, you face an immediate problem. What should you charge him with? This isn't normally a problem prosecutors face, as they start with a crime, then figure out who done it, rather than starting with a person and only then deciding what the done. But Trump wants Comey charged and is convinced he's guilty of something, and it's your job now to figure out what. Realistically, you've only got a few choices here, and they all suck. Nearly all of them involve charging Comey with some kind of false statement in connection with his September 30th, 2020 testimony before the Senate Judiciary Committee. That's the last testimony he gave, and it's almost exactly 5 years ago. This idea is appealing because it might just be possible to slap together a simple false statements case and get it under the wire. Assuming that is that you can convince a grand jury that there is probable cause that Comey knowingly testified falsely at the hearing as to any matter of material fact, and here the right-wing fever swamp brims with putative possibilities. Perhaps Comey testified falsely when, for example, he stood by his earlier testimony from May 2017 that he had never authorized leaks by anonymous sources of material about the Trump or Hillary Clinton investigations. So this is, in fact, right, what they went for. This authorized someone else to be an anonymous source. So that is the alleged false statement. Got it? Back in August, this independent reporter declared on Twitter that testimony seems problematic, citing material related to an investigation called Tropic Vortex, which dealt with a disclosure to the New York Times that took place in October of 2016 and was investigated by John Durham. Yet a quick look at the documents revealed that this material is most unlikely to be damaging for Comey given the testimony. For one, it was fully investigated during the first Trump administration, and the Justice Department declined to bring charges against anyone in connection with it. So they're referencing one possibility is this New York Times disclosure to the New York Times that is related to an investigation called Tropic Vortex. But the reason that they're saying that one problem with it is it was already investigated by Durham. The closing memo for the investigation is dated March 20th, meaning that any non-prosecution decisions were made no later than under Bill Barr. For another thing, it appears to have nothing whatsoever to do with either the Trump or Clinton investigations, which was the subject of Comey's testimony in 2017. The documents don't reveal much about the story in question, and folks in the right-wing press have assumed that the story is one from October 31st, which dealt with the Russian investigation. That's a reasonable assumption, but it is still an assumption and is very likely wrong. The documents reveal several facts about the underlying articles. It appeared in October 2016. It was sourced to 2 government officials. It contained classified information, and it was involving the FBI. Only one news story meets this criteria. And this is buttressed by evidence at the Michael Sussman trial, where former FBI General Counsel James Baker testified that there had been a leak investigation conducted by Durham, which was related to an issue, and that issue was this Yahoo email story that has nothing to do with Trump or with Clinton. Okay, so the first option is leaks to the New York Times, but those New York Times are most likely related to this, Vortex investigation about this Yahoo investigation. Thank you for the raid. And the Yahoo story doesn't have anything to do with Trump or with Clinton. And the answer that he's being pegged with is about Trump or Clinton. All right. So the 2017 answer, which is referenced by Cruz, right, is about the Trump or Clinton investigation, not about this Yahoo story regarding it's like something about CSAM or something. Doesn't have anything to do with Russia investigation, Clinton. So this seems like a dead end, this whole theory. Okay? That's about the Durham investigation, this Operation Vortex, Tropic Vortex, and this theory of going to the New York Times with this leak, but it has nothing to do with Trump or with Clinton. In other words, Harridge's premise here, that's the Twitter account that said this, appears to be factually wrong, even if Comey improperly authorized a classified disclosure to the New York Times in connection with that story, and we are certainly not saying that he did, and we note as well the investigation of that matter recommended no charges against either Baker or anyone else. Comey likely wouldn't have been lying in this exchange with Grassley, where Grassley is directly asking about matters related to the Trump investigation or Clinton investigation. So the New York Times one seems like a dud, okay? Nor would he have been lying 5 years less 6 days ago when he had this exchange before the Senate Judiciary Committee with Senator Ted Cruz about his earlier testimony. Comey, I stand by the testimony you summarized that I gave in May of 2017. So where he's specifically saying, I stand by this testimony, right? So it doesn't appear to be the New York Times story. Cruz's specific allusion to McCabe presents another possibility, but it's another lemon. The McCabe matter relates to an October 30th, 2016 article published in the Wall Street Journal, which cited an anonymous source confirming the existence of an FBI investigation into the Clinton Foundation, a probe that, prior to the article's publication, the FBI had refused to confirm. The article also detailed internal disputes between the FBI and DOJ over how to proceed with the investigation. But this is really fucked if you listen to this. So this is the actual, what's most likely to be the theory of this case. So just keep that in mind as I keep reading this. In response to the Wall Street Journal, the Justice Department's Office of the Inspector General opened an internal probe to determine whether the article contained unauthorized disclosures, and if so, who was responsible, right? This was a probe. I was aware. I read this. This is the Andy McCabe probe. This came out in 2018. So this has already been investigated by the DOJ, by the IG. The inquiry ultimately focused on potential misconduct by McCabe, the then FBI deputy director. In a report made public in 2018, the IG found that McCabe inappropriately authorized aides to disclose sensitive information about the Clinton probe to the Wall Street Journal, and that he demonstrated a lack of candor when questioned about it on multiple occasions by FBI investigators. So you're like, wait a second. So this is an indictment of James Comey. But wait a second. It's McCabe who was the person who disclosed to the Wall Street Journal. You get me? So what's the deal here? How do we get Comey in on this, right? As the Inspector General report details, Comey and McCabe's accounts of the leaking episode contradicted one another. In his telling, Comey denied authorizing the leak and claimed that he was ignorant of McCabe's own plan to authorize the disclosure. Comey said that his first conversation with McCabe about the leak occurred after the article's publication on October 31st, 2016. During that meeting, according to Comey, McCabe definitely did not tell me that he had authorized the disclosure. Comey said McCabe gave him the opposite impression. I don't remember exactly how, but I remember some form or fashion. It could have been like, can you believe this crap? How does this stuff get out kind of thing? But I took from whatever communication we had that he wasn't involved in it. By contrast, McCabe said that he told Comey during the October 31st meeting that he had authorized the leak. According to McCabe, Comey did not react negatively, just kind of accepted it. When he said he authorized the leak, he means McCabe. So McCabe is saying, so Comey says, right, that McCabe never admitted that he authorized the leak. That McCabe was saying that he didn't know who authorized it. McCabe said, I told Comey on October 31st that I had authorized. According to McCabe, Comey did not react negatively, just kind of accepted it. McCabe also claimed that Comey thought it was a good idea that they presented this information to the media. So McCabe is characterizing his conversations with Comey and saying Comey thought it was a good idea after the fact, right? That he didn't react negatively after it, right? That's, by the way, a he said, she said, where McCabe is your star witness and where McCabe hates Trump and Trump hates McCabe. So it would totally rely on McCabe, right? Like, the only people who met on that meeting were Comey and McCabe. And all McCabe is saying is, after the fact, even if you accept McCabe, Comey did not react, that Comey didn't react negatively and kind of accepted it. Not that he authorized it, that he thought it was a good idea after the fact. It's obvious that McCabe and Comey offered different recollections of events surrounding the leak episode, but it's equally obvious that those divergent recollections will not support a prosecution. Indeed, as a criminal case against either man, this case has deep problems. For one, there's no evidence that Comey was lying about these interactions. Though his account and McCabe's are not consistent, it is not at all clear that Comey's memory is the false one, much less that any errors in his account were intentional. The IG found that it was McCabe whose answers lacked candor. Indeed, the report found the overwhelming weight, this is the IG, the overwhelming weight of that evidence supported Comey's version of the conversation. Among other reasons supporting Comey's side of the story, the IG noted that McCabe's claim that he told Comey about the disclosure on October 31st is inconsistent with his statements during earlier interviews in which he said he had not authorized the disclosure and did not know who. So McCabe is caught like lying, right? That before he said he did not authorize it, and then he said, well, I did authorize it and I told Comey after. The DOJ, quite disgracefully, tried to bring a criminal case against McCabe for his statements in the matter. A grand jury in 2019 refused to return it. So they tried to charge him in 2019, McCabe that is, on the subject. It would be quite rich, having sought and failed to charge one party to a memory dispute, to turn around and try to charge the other. So that is exactly what they're doing, right? They charged McCabe believing Comey in 2019, and now they're trying to charge Comey believing McCabe. But also, McCabe doesn't even allege, right? McCabe doesn't even allege that Comey authorized it. It's that after the fact, he was okay with it. And I want to just stress again, this is all about Hillary Clinton. This is all about a disclosure of an investigation into Hillary Clinton. So this has nothing to do with investigations into Trump. And so it's back to square one, where Trump is arguing that he's firing Comey because of how badly he treated how badly he treated Clinton. And now he's trying to bring an inconsistent charge from a previous theory against Comey because they disclosed against Clinton and lied about it, allegedly. When they didn't even, in my opinion, I don't think Comey lied at all. I have no reason to believe that. The case has another problem. McCabe's own statements to the Inspector General acknowledges that he did not discuss the disclosure with Comey in advance of the publication. As the report summarizes, McCabe told us that he did not recall telling Comey prior to the publication of the October 30th article that he intended to authorize or had authorized special counsel and ADOPA to recount his August 12th call, although he said it was possible he did. In other words, neither McCabe nor Comey suggest that Comey knew about or authorized this leak prior to the article's publication. Yet that is what Cruz's question to Comey in 2020 was about. At best, McCabe's account of the October 31st meeting suggests that Comey acquiesced to the disclosure after the fact, but he never authorized it, even under the least generous version of the facts. So that case is also dead. And it looks like this is the case that they're going to be running with. And so I might stop there and get to conclusions here. If there's the Dan Richman option, we might get over it if we get more information. But my sense is, because it involves McCabe, and because McCabe is also someone who is one of these rogues gallery figures, that this is likely. And given the kind of language here where they're referencing but not referencing the person too, my guess is that this person too is going to be McCabe. And so this is what you have to believe, right? You have to believe that they give a shit, that Comey lied to Cruz and Grassley about authorizing disclosures against Hillary Clinton. You have to believe that they care about that. You have to believe that McCabe is correct totally, even when he's inconsistent, and the IG seems to credit Comey's version of events. And after the Department of Justice itself, under Trump, previously tried to go after McCabe, presumably because they believed Comey. And also, you have to believe in time travel. You have to believe in time travel because you have to believe that Comey on October 31st can travel back in time to authorize something before he even knows about it when the article was published on October 30th. They don't have a principle in their body at all. At all. They don't give a shit. Update. Okay, so apparently we know that Andy McCabe is not person 2, and the reason Andy McCabe is not person 2 is we think that Donald Trump is person 2. This is because the grand jury refused to indict on one of the theories of the Department of Justice that had a completely different statement from Comey's testimony related to Hillary Clinton's plan concerning Donald Trump. This is the exchange in that from Senator Lindsey Graham. And you can see the quotation here is Hillary Clinton's approval of a plan concerning Donald Trump, and where Comey saying that that didn't ring any bells with him. Also notice the difference between the transcript and what was put in the indictment, where the transcript says being talk and the indictment says being taught. So that might have some relevance in the case in which the grand jury had followed through on the indictment on this theory, but they didn't follow through on this. And what's the upshot of all this? The upshot of all this is it's very likely that the theory that I presented just now about the exchange between Comey and McCabe and whether or not they approved that disclosure to the Wall Street Journal is true. The reason why that's further confirmed is person 1 isn't Trump, it's Hillary Clinton, and the only working theory that connects James Comey to some ostensible disclosure regarding Hillary Clinton is that Andy McCabe disclosure to the Wall Street Journal. That's really the only working theory at this point.